Hello, it's Alex and welcome to the Geeks Table. And that's right, we shall talk about external storage today, specifically the external storage for your smartphone, specifically for the Pro iPhones with a USB 3 USB-C port. We shall test it with a Galaxy phone and a Mac as well, but primarily the focus will be on the iPhone. But why would we need an external storage, you might ask? And I would happily name you a few use cases. The Pro iPhones are expensive like crazy, and one can save some money by buying a model with a small amount of storage. But once the storage is full, we just connect an external drive, transfer your photos of, cats and raccoons, and boom, your iPhone's memory is free again. Or you have to transfer the files between an iPhone, an Android phone, and a Windows PC. Rather than doing that via cloud or messengers, one can do that via an external drive. Or you wish to watch some previously saved videos, so you plug the drive in and watch them without filling up the storage of your phone. Or something more specific, like editing videos in LumaFusion, which can work directly with the external drives. And speaking about the videos, there's another use case. You may record those videos directly to an external drive with the default iPhone camera app or the free Blackmagic camera app. So as you can see, there are a lot of use cases. But not every drive will have you covered in all of them. And that's why I've made this video. So this is how we'll do it. First of all, I'll show you my top 10 picks for an external storage, like their externals, capabilities and features. And then I'll show you how good they are in terms of speed, temperature, battery consumption, overall reliability, and handling the external video recording. So by the end of this video, you should have one or two candidates to go with that match exactly your needs. Feel free to use the chapters, stop the video to check the data carefully, do whatever you want, and let's jump right into it. First one to look at is Acasis EC-6609 Air, and it's an enclosure for an M2 2230 NVMe SSD. And if you ever watched videos about external storage, you've definitely heard of Acasis and that they make a range of best Thunderbolt enclosures. So it made me curious to see if a simpler enclosure of that brand will also be any good. It's easy to open, the SSD goes in without any tools, and the best part is that you can attach it magnetically to your iPhone. It even comes with a special USB-C cable of the correct length. I should note here that this is the only enclosure among today's contestants that was sent to me and I did not pay for it. I don't have any financial relationship with Acasis, but just know that I got this one for free. And of course, no special treatment will be given to it. Moving on, so the next one is another 2230 NVMe SSD enclosure, Hagibis MC100. By the shape you probably guessed it already, it's also Magsafe compatible. And it comes not with one, but with two USB-C cables of different length to match the size of your phone. The installation requires two screwdrivers, but nothing to worry about, they have them included. Surprisingly, this enclosure has two USB-C ports, one to transfer the data, and the other one, that's right, passes through up to 100 watts of power. So while you use the storage enclosure, you may also charge your iPhone at the same time. By the way, don't worry, both Acasis and Hagibis won't scratch your iPhone, because they have a soft non-metal material on those sides that attach to the back of the phone. Next one is this little tiny box, which you may have seen already online. It has many names. I bought it as Jeyi. It's just as big as 2230 NVMe SSD plus the magnetic cover. Good news, the USB-C is long enough that it would work with an iPhone in a case without a problem. But bad news, if you use it with a laptop, it will block all the ports around. Moving on, and this is another non-magnetic enclosure, now from Gewokliy, and it's called Gewokliy E13. This one is quite bulky, check out the thickness, and it has also this rubber protector all around itself, which also has a loop. And the loop doubles as the USB-C cable. It looks smart, but I wouldn't put it on my keychain to be honest, just not to accidentally lose my data. Oh, and I'm actually proud of this one. There is a high chance that you may have one of these Samsung SSDs already. T3, T5, T7, Touch or Shield, you name it. So I bought a magnetic car holder for the iPhone, not the Apple one, but one that can fit up to 6 credit cards. And as you can see, this part is stretching. So what I can do is I can fit my SSD there, and the port will be exactly over here. So all that's left is to connect it to the SSD with some sort of flexible cable and attach it to the back of the phone. A very cheap but effective upgrade. Of course, I couldn't ignore this one. It's the OWC Envoy Pro Mini. A portable SSD in the form of a traditional thumb drive. It's metal, looks cool, and has both USB-C and USB-A ports. But it has a huge problem. One cannot use it with a phone in a case. Look at the part around USB-C. It's completely flat. And USB-C itself is too short. So it's impossible to connect it to the phone in a case. So I had to buy this adapter from MoKo, which supports data transfer and power delivery. So it goes to the phone like this, and the OWC goes over here, and now I can use it. Another SSD of the same form factor is Netac US5. It also has USB-C and USB-A. It also is made of metal, and I should note that it works fine with the phone in a case. Since we talk about SSDs in a form factor of a flash drive, why not to test something on a real flash drive? So I've added this one from Transcend to our competition. It's not an SSD obviously, but pretty fast for its class, so I hope it will be a good alternative. And it also has both USB-C and USB-A ports, which is always nice to have. And finally, our two remaining candidates. They are the MicroSD cards and the card reader. One of them represents a top-class citizen, the UHS-II, and the other one a lower-class citizen, the UHS-I. And they are paired with a card reader that is capable of transferring both UHS-II and UHS-I speeds. So it should be good enough. So these are our candidates, and let's look at the first four of them. Those are SSD enclosures which require an SSD drive to be put inside. So which SSDs are the best to go with? Well, worth noting that they can't be bigger than 2 terabytes, and all four enclosures limit the speeds to 10 gigabits per second, which is roughly 1.2 gigabytes per second. Currently on the market, there are PCIe 3 and PCIe 4 drives, with the more older PCIe 3 slowly fading away. However, in terms of speed, they both have such high bandwidths compared to these boxes that there is no difference if you buy a PCIe 3 or PCIe 4 drive. You'll never get their maximum, and you'll be capped by the limit of 10 gigabits per second. But be careful when buying SSDs, because different SSDs require different amount of power. And iPhone's USB port is quite picky. So if you buy a fancy SSD with like super high speed, caching and some bells and whistles, it may be rejected by the port and simply won't be visible. I tried 4 SSDs, and as you can see, one of the recent and popular Western digital drives got rejected because it required too much power. So for the test, I ended up using Corsair MP600 Mini and the one from the Sharkspeed. It didn't indicate the exact model, so I will just include the link in the description. Alright, so first thing to look at is the speed. And external storage may act differently whether you manage a big amount of small files or small amount of big files. And that's why I read and wrote 300 of photos and then read and wrote 2 videos. And in total they were exactly 64 gigabytes. So this should give me an idea how they manage these two conditions. If we look briefly at the results, we can say that Acasis, Hagibis and Samsung were the fastest. And no surprise that Transcend and UHS-I card were the slowest. But what's more interesting is that iOS takes almost the exactly same time to write 300 small files of 2 gigabytes in total as 2 big files of 62 gigabytes in total. Which means that if you want to back up a lot of photos, aka small files, it will take ages to copy them on these devices. Now let's switch to the Samsung Fold for the reference, and here we get almost double the times we had on the iPhone. I assume it's because the USB-C port here supports only 5 gigabits per second speeds compared to the 10 gigabits per second on the iPhone, but good news is that it handles writing the small files much better. Let's switch to the Mac results, and here in addition we have an option to measure the actual bandwidth thanks to the Blackmagic app. And I immediately noticed the difference between read and write speeds of the Transcend flash drive. And actually the same thing goes to Netac US5. So those might be good options for consuming the data, but not for writing it. And overall, Acasis, Hagibis and Jeyi keep being the fastest options here. And while we're talking about the Mac, I wanted to share this new enclosure from Acasis that they sent me alongside the small one. If you watched my video about the external storage for Mac, you know that Acasis T401E was one of the best, and I ended up going with it. But it made me thinking, what if it had a fan to cool down an SSD while I'm editing a video? Or what if I could attach some peripherals or even some screens to it? And that's exactly what I was given. Welcome Acasis T405Plus, a Thunderbolt 4 enclosure with dock station capabilities and a built-in fan. It still has a familiar design and a tool-free installation, but now on top of that it also has a built-in fan to take the heat away. Also it has lots of useful ports around it, the Thunderbolt 4 and pass-through charging over the USB-C, 2 display ports version 1.4, 2 USB-A ports version 3.1, and 1 more USB-C port on the other side. And if you don't need a fan, which gets a bit annoying sometimes, simply turn the lid around and close it, and the fan gets turned off. Oh, and the speed, well, this is the same good Acasis. Nothing to complain about. So if you're on the market not only for the small external storage but for a big one, I highly recommend looking at this one. Non-affiliated link will be in the description, and now let's switch to the temperature results. All storage gets hot when being used, no surprise here, and it's important to have the ways to cool it down. For example, Acasis has lots of area around the SSD and also this wave-shaped cover to have a better heat dissipation. Jeyi, on the other hand, has nothing of that, given the size, so all the heat goes through this case, and because it's so close to the SSD itself, sometimes it's even uncomfortable to touch it with bare hands. But let's see the numbers, shall we? During my data transfer tests, the temperature of the UHS-II card skyrocketed. One could literally boil a tiny egg on that tiny microSD card. Next one was Jeyi, and I wouldn't recommend you touching an enclosure that's as hot as 52 degrees Celsius. Hagibis was the lowest increase, but look at the iPhone. The iPhone got 11 degrees hotter. But overall, during all the tests, the iPhone remained in 30 to 40 degrees Celsius, which is fine even on a long run. And except this weird case with Hagibis, there was nearly no difference whether you attach the storage to the back of the phone or it sticks out of the port. Switching to the Samsung now, and remember I told you that mine has a slower USB-C port? Here is the outcome. We have to spend more time transferring the data, and more time in use leads to higher temperatures of the devices. Overall, it's also within the range of 30 to 40 degrees Celsius, but closer to 40. And what about the battery in this case? Well, the situation is actually not that bad, and just in case we're talking about the battery percentage of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, so your percentage may be different, but it still might help you to get the whole picture. And the whole picture looks promising. In fact, now I get it why Apple limited the power of USB-C. Otherwise, a power-hungry SSD would suck all the battery juice from the poor iPhone. Of course, we have bigger numbers on slower devices because, well, the longer you're transferring, the more battery is consumed. Alright, we've checked the speed, temperature, battery, so what about stability? And I've noticed the following pattern. If I plug in an empty drive and it gets working in no time, everything works just fine, tip-top. But if the drive has some data, especially lots of small files, like a photo library or like a video project, then the things become more complicated. Suddenly the write speeds may be twice as slow, or the Files app becomes unresponsive and the iPhone decides to index all those files in the background, and that all brings us to an unpleasant experience. So the main rule here would be keep only the necessary files on the storage you attach to your phone. You want to watch a couple of films and a photo album? Fine, have just them on your drive. You want to edit a project in LumaFusion? Fine, just have exactly that project and work with it happily. You want to record a video? Just keep your drive empty and ready. And actually, that's about time to talk about recording the videos. So let's cover the basics real quick. Imagine this is the camera app, this is the phone, and this is some sort of an external storage attached to your phone. The camera constantly captures the video data and sends it to your phone, and the phone has its own memory and it's way faster than the external storage. So it saves the video data to its fast memory, and in the meantime, in the background, the video data is being moved from the memory to the external storage. And that's the whole process. So the main idea is to always keep this pile on the phone small. If we record 4K 60 MP4, the data is really tiny, so it gets almost in no time through the phone storage to the external storage. If it's ProRes LT, the amount of data is bigger and the process becomes a bit slower. And if it's ProRes or ProRes HQ, the files become ridiculously huge and it becomes challenging to go through the whole process. So what's the key secret to the success? Have enough empty storage on the phone, so you'll have enough space to put this pile to, and get the fastest external drive possible, so you'll be able to clean up this pile on time. But what if it's not the case? What happens if you're out of phone's memory or the external storage is too slow? Well, you will start losing frames. The pile is all packed up, so many of the new frames just won't be saved. You will still keep recording your video, but it becomes stuttering, it freezes for a moment, and it all adds up, and finally you see this fancy message saying that the recording has been interrupted. And I've tested exactly that, how reliable this or that storage is. But before that, I just have to show you this. Power of Magsafe in action, ladies and gentlemen. A Magsafe case, a Magsafe tripod mount, then a Magsafe storage, and finally a Magsafe cooler. And now we're ready for some serious work, guys. But jokes aside, because Hagibis allows us to pass through the charging and also we can attach the fan, I decided to include these configurations to our tests just to see if they have any impact. So first, let's check the recording of 15 minutes in MP4 4K 60. Unfortunately, the default iPhone camera doesn't support external recording for that. But you can download a free camera app from Blackmagic, and there you would go to the settings, tap the codec, and select H.264, which will be exactly the MP4 that we're looking for. Now we scroll all the way down to the media, select Saves Clips to, tap Files, and select our external drive. And after 15 minutes of recording, this is what I've got. In terms of temperature, the biggest increase we've got from Jeyi and UHS-II MicroSD card, which is already expected. We know that they're bad at heat dissipation. We also got it for Hagibis with pass-through charging on. And the pass-through charging also reflected in the iPhone's temperature. The highest one is when it's being charged. That's also nothing surprising because whenever you charge your phone, it gets warm. Speaking of the fan option, well, the fan really helps to reduce the heat from the drive, I would say dramatically, but quite a bit from the iPhone itself. As for the battery, Acasis was the most power hungry here, and UHS-I card being the less power hungry. And no surprise, when you charge your phone, it's being charged, so here we got an increase in battery level rather than a decrease. Overall, MP4 files are relatively small, so any option will fit your needs. even a simple UHS-I card. Moving on to the ProRes LT. This is the codec that I film in, and to me that's a great balance between the file size and the picture quality. In most of the cases, it consumed exactly the same 9% of the battery, regardless of the storage that I used. And Jeyi and Netac did some magic here. The temperature got a bit higher compared to the MP4 recording, but overall I'd say we're still good to go with any of the storage options if we wish to record ProRes LT. Next is ProRes with no additional letters, just ProRes, and it's also recorded via Blackmagic app. Now Apple made it a bit confusing here because its own camera can record ProRes as well. But that ProRes is what every other app would call ProRes HQ, and we shall look at it a bit later. Well, thanks Apple for making it so clear. So we're looking at standard ProRes now. To my regret, some contestants failed the 15 minutes ProRes recording test. Samsung T7 stopped recording at some point, and the same did the Transcend drive. Also, the UHS-I card managed to record a clip, but it started dropping the frames closer to the end. All others had no problems whatsoever, and they were even generous to the battery. I would say 10 to 12% for 15 minutes of ProRes recording is not that bad at all. Now let's have a look at the ProRes HQ. It's the highest quality possible, the biggest files possible, and you may need it only if you do some professional work, you get paid for it, and you rely heavily on the color grading. And as I previously said, you can record in ProRes HQ via both iPhone default camera app and the Blackmagic camera app. And here we see, obviously, more storage options failing, because the files now are ridiculously huge. No more MicroSD cards, Transcend flash drive is also out, and even Gewokliy with an SSD inside, all failed. Also, Samsung T7 and Netac US5 did manage to finish the recording, but got dropped frames. And only Acasis, Hagibis, Jeyi and OWC managed to record without a problem. Wrapping up this video, I'd like to give you some of my recommendations and share what I've eventually ended up with. So I kept the Transcend JetFlash and the Acasis enclosure with the Corsair SSD in it. For media consumption, Transcend is a good balance between price, versatility and speed. It does have slow write speeds, but I mostly read from it, so for me it's okay. As for Acasis, it is good for external recording just because it can handle any codec without a problem, and it also has good heat dissipation and it can be attached via Magsafe. However, if you plan 30 or 60 minutes of non-stop ProRes recording, or you plan to edit projects in LumaFusion on your phone, you might want to go with Hagibis just to have that pass-through power option, and if you go absolutely bananas, you may even attach that Magsafe fan on top to keep the temperature down. As for other contestants, none of them is bad really, so if you stumble across a good deal, just go for it. Just be aware of their limitations, which you are already since you've watched the video till the very end. And now, if you have your own thoughts on the matter, feel free to leave a comment, hit a like if this video was helpful to you, check the links in the description. It's been Alex and see you at the Geeks Table. Bye bye.